Welcome to reality. Brief little vid here about Turd Cruz, a little piece of crap running for president right now. Canadian-born immigrant Ted Cruz likes to create anti-immigration policies. Has some problem with Syrian refugees. This all-loving pro-life Christian has a problem with the Syrian refugees coming in here, who are basically fighting for their lives to survive, and they want to go anywhere they can. But because they're Muslim, and America is a secular country that has no religious disposition of any kind at all, he has this idea that they should be tested for their religious faith. It's one of the craziest things I've ever heard in my life. He could be right, though. America should have a religious test. I think a practical test, since we're a secular country, we won't want to let heavily religious people into our country. I think that would be a safeguard. Most violent acts of terrorism or other acts of spree killing and serial killing are almost exclusively perpetrated by Christians. Not Muslims, not other types of religions, but by Christians. So we should probably be keeping an eye on them, at least radical ones. Now, there's nothing wrong with believing in religion. It's fine if you believe in Santa Claus. It's when believing in Santa Claus prompts you to do things that are violent, self-righteous ones, believing that you're entitled to something else or you're doing Santa Claus's work. He's giving you the list of bad people. So you've taken it unto yourself, because of course you're not Santa, unless you're that delusional and you think you're Santa too. But let's just say you think you're doing Santa's work. That's often a basis for the insanity and delusion that causes the violent acts of rage and murder, extreme ones like we just saw in France, and like the Christians committed with the Crusades. In fact, the Christians, although religious dogma goes back way, way before them, they stole their story from other fables going way, way back, much, much farther. All the same birth dates of Jesus, all that 25th, all that stolen from other religions that precede it. But regardless, they rely on that stuff to commit atrocities. That ends up being the basis for what they're doing. So they're doing it for these magical gods. So let's say they think they're doing Santa's work, blah, blah, blah. That's the dependence, and that's the excuse for committing these atrocities, which are nothing short of murder, taking human life without any threat to your own life or any condition that makes it necessary for you to take either an offensive or defensive position that would result in the taking of a life. So we should probably ask all prospective immigrants to America if they believe in evolution. If they don't, clearly they shouldn't enter the United States of America. We're secular and we're a science-based system. And the more educated they are, the less prone to violence they are. The more religious you are, the lower your intelligence. The lower your intelligence, the more likely you are to pick up a rock or a bone, a camel leg bone, or a big wrench from your mechanic's pallet there and hurt someone with it. We don't want any of that in any event, regardless of the religious dogma consumed by the adherent, the cultist. Then we should ask them how old the earth is. If they don't know it's billions of years old, they probably should be denied admittance again. There will be 5 questions, and any single failed response would deny entry. So let's move along. That was number 2. Number 3 would be, let's see, a stumper for Christians. What's inside the pyramids? I think that's kind of a trick question, because everyone normal knows what's inside there, but that one can really be a kind of a perplexing poser for the religious kook. So, okay, let's move along. That was 3. Number 4, I think number 4 would be, do you think Santa Claus / God, the same thing, only Santa is a benevolent fictional character and God is an evil fictional character, but do you believe Santa / God are real or fictional characters? I think that would weed out a lot of idiots. We could do ourselves a favor by rejecting those ones right off. And then 5's probably the most important. I think 5 would be, would you in any way use your personal religious dogma, your personal faith and beliefs in your individual fairy tale to harm, infect, or in any way impede or impinge the rights of any other person? Because once you start using and relying on your religion to influence or in any way obstruct the rights of others, then you're practicing exactly what America is not about. That's an anti-American action. We don't want that here. That's why we don't allow any religion in school or anywhere else. We don't want it. That is a harassment to people. So Ted Cruz, Ted Cruz, the small peewee-like looking piece of shit anti-American Canadian-born runt who's trying to force its way into our White House, which will never happen, especially after he single-handedly lowered our credit rating for the first time in U.S. history by obstructing our debt ceiling increase, which Reagan did, the Lord and Savior of the GOP religious cult. Reagan did 18 times while he was in office, along with the 11 tax increases that he did. So, when you look at reality, you gotta look at that. So, yes, Ted Cruz is right. We should have a religious test to keep religious people out of America. I don't want to misquote Ted Cruz. I believe he said something to the effect that there is no meaningful risk of Christians committing acts of terrorism. Something like that. I think that's nearly verbatim. Regardless of that, he's never right. He's always wrong. I mean, that's kind of a given, and he's a flip-flopping, hypocritical piece of shit. But aside from being wrong on everything, thinking that Christians are exempt as terrorists has got to be one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. Tim McVeigh was a Christian. In fact, most serial killers and spree killers are Christians. The Aryan Nation is a Christian organization. Adolf Hitler was a Christian who prayed 3 times a day. These people infect life with their bullshit. People like Ted Cruz. The Aryan Nation, KKK, I mean, these are inherently Christian organizations. What about the Christian Identity Movement? I mean, these are other lowlifes. These are real terrorists who use bombs to murder people exactly the same way that Al-Qaeda and any terrorist organization would, like these cretins in France. It doesn't matter what religion you're using. When you use it to be self-righteous, like Ted Cruz, and specifically say, oh, Christians are exempt. I mean, this is the kind of behavior we don't want in America. We are secular. We want to weed out pieces of shit like Turd Cruz. We would ask dearly that Canada please take this loaf of shit back. Ugh, he's stinking our country up with his bullshit. The Lord's Resistance Army. What about, what's that other one? The Army of God. I mean, these are the abortion clinic bombers. They murder people. They shoot abortion doctors. They blow buildings up. They destroy personal property of others. Incidentally, it's legal to have an abortion in this country. We had a case long ago that determined that. These people are creepy, crazy, trying to dictate the laws and the way society works using terrorism. Blowing things up is not something that you do to get change. It is an act of terrorism. These are creepy religious cults that use terrorism to achieve terror, to frighten people, to destroy something. They're just as criminal as Al-Qaeda and every other terrorist organization. The KKK, the Aryan Nation. You think these guys go into Congress and present their cases? Or do you think they deface cemeteries, burn things down? Churches, incidentally, sometimes, that don't go by things they want. Black churches. Very creepy thing. So Turd Crust is right. America should have some sort of religious test for immigrants coming in to make sure that they're not religious extremists of any sect. So as soon as they show symptoms of any kind of religious fanaticism, like Turd Cruz is, then we get rid of them. I think the process should start by deporting some, the most dangerous ones. So Turd Crush should be the first one in line to be kicked out by the steel boot of American secularism. Turd Cruz, why don't you go run for president of Canada? We don't want you here. You deface our country's values and integrity with every disgusting word you utter. Please go away. You're vile.